Dr. Daniella Zsupan-Jerome, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is such a privilege to be in this conversation with you about women in the church.
It is. And there's so many misconceptions about women's roles in the church and what women, how women have been treated and what the church says about femininity. We really feel like it's exciting to be able to talk about women who have decided to use their gifts and talents in really to service to the local church and broader, as you have. You're not just working here in New Orleans. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what has kind of brought you to this point.
Well, I've only been in New Orleans for about 8 years now, and I came here to work as a professor at Loyola in their ministry program. So that's how I came here. But I'm from actually Eastern Europe. And I grew up in the 80s there, where Catholicism and religion was just coming back as something people regularly, publicly could practice. And so I have that sort of unique background where I inherited the faith from a context where, it was taught to me in the home through grandma and through family traditions rather than like a rigorous, religious education program, which came later. So I always cherished the faith because it was something that my cultural background didn't have for a long time. 40 years or so under communism. So it's very special to me. It's very much something that's a gift and it should be appreciated. And God always gave me opportunities along the way through my studies to deepen my understanding of the tradition. I studied at Notre Dame, the other Notre Dame in Indiana, St. John's in Collegeville, which is a Benedictine school, at Yale, and at Boston College, different angles on Catholicism and Catholic theology. And I ended up studying catechesis, faith formation. How do you hand on the contents of the faith? And I'm really passionate about that, and I was delighted to have this opportunity to come to New Orleans, to Loyola, my first job, and to teach that, and now at Notre Dame Seminary. I continue to work with that, with pastoral theology.
So in your schooling, and you say you have a passion for handing down the faith, when did you make the decision to do this as a career, to be a theologian?
I remember I was on retreat in graduate school. And I remember on that retreat very clearly learning about this book Christian Smith, who's a sociologist, had written about what percentages of people actually understand and appreciate their faith. And for Catholic, I think it was in the 20s or something. And I don't know why, but it punched me in the gut. And I was convicted, like, we have this amazing story, which is the gospel, which is the story of Jesus Christ and his good news. And people don't know it. And we don't know how to tell it well, apparently, if only 20-some% of people get it and live by it. So I really felt convicted since then to be active in handing on this story. And with all the schooling and formation I received, that became more and more something I've done in the academic context. Teach people to be ministers, to be formators, to be priests, to be lay ministers, to be people who serve and witness to the gospel.
And so often, you talk about 20% of the Catholics only being active. People who are outside of the church, and even those who are in the church, don't realize that a woman can be a theologian. They think it's a monk locked up in a monastery somewhere, but you are an active human being in your community. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a woman, you're a teacher, you're a theologian. What does it mean to have all of those roles?
I think it's really interesting. First of all, yes, you're right. Like a lot of our tradition's history rests on the shoulders of men ordained or religious who had the time to sit down and be inspired by the word to do theology. But women also had throughout history, and tradition tells us that the church, yes, is built upon the rock of Peter. There's a Petrine foundation, but it's also built upon the Blessed Mother. Mm-hmm. So there's also a Marian foundation to the church, and the two are held in balance. So I definitely think there's a role for both men and women to contribute to the teaching and witnessing of faith in different ways according to their states of life. And for me personally, as a mother, first of all, as a mom and as a wife, and also as a professional who teaches the faith, it's a juggling game. It really is, and sorting that out and how to do that authentically in all those different roles of my vocation. It's a gift, but it's also a challenge. I'm still learning it.
I think we're all still learning. I mean, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, professionally in the church, and it is. You want to give so much of yourself, and I often think that because we work for the church, because we are working for something greater, that the passing on of the faith, it helps us, it inspires us. But as you say, it's a constant challenge to be truly an authentic woman, and our primary focus being on our first vocation is wife and mother, and then in our roles. But do you see more women rising to this challenge?
I think so. I think before I had my son, I might have had a different answer to it, like, oh, of course. But I think now that I'm learning how to balance motherhood and family and domestic life with the profession, which is a rigorous thing. To be an academic in any context is very rigorous and demands a lot of one's attention. I think more women would join and rise in these professional ranks if there was a way to better balance all the responsibilities that we have. And I think there are. But I think that to juggle that is not an easy thing. So I think as women weigh this and think about their vocation and think about their calling to pursue theology academically, to think about how to also handle these other responsibilities, which are so amazing and life-giving in different ways. A whole culture has to sustain that and hold that, right? The family support structure, the institution and its support structure, all of that has to sustain that so that a woman can do that.
And as a woman, what does it mean to be able to help form new church leaders? You have some role at the seminary with some of the seminarians, as well as lay ministers who are going through the seminary right now. What does it mean to have that role to you?
It's an amazing gift. It really is. I do work with seminarians in terms of as a professor of pastoral theology, as well as the lay program there, and I oversee part of that administratively. And it's an amazing gift to be the one to help form others, minister and serve and go and wash feet. It really is. So, the totality of my person comes into that, not just my femininity, but the totality of who I am. And I think as much as I can bring in my life experience as a lay person, as a woman, into the wisdom that I try to impart or the conversations I try to create, I think the better it is, because that's who they will be called to serve. People, married people, single people, people in the pew, people with families. So at least in their formation, to be attentive to the experience of people like that. And if it can come from a teacher, I think that's great. They can better than serve God's people who are a variety of states of life. I think that's a really good connection there.
Well, we are very grateful for your witness. We're grateful you're here in New Orleans, and we're grateful that you're here to be a woman of witness.
I'm grateful to have been asked. Thank you.